Good morning, everybody. I wanted to delay it a couple of minutes because I have something to say, and I'd like most of the people that are going to gather to hear it. And that is my introduction of Matt. I think all of you know Matt, raised here in the church. You know him better than I do, actually. But about 2 or 3 months ago, he spoke at our service, and I was so impressed. I said, this is a guy that's living the faith, isn't he? And I actually made you a gift, man, that I was going to give to you at the end. There's a problem. I have choir. I have choir. And so there's several of us here this morning that have choir, and they're going to leave you about 9:15. So I'm going to give you the gift now. And it's a gift because I think it represents you. You know that I'm the guy that makes stained glass around here? Okay. So this is an adaptation of James Hiquay. It's the Good Samaritan, and I think you're the perfect living example of a Good Samaritan.
That's too much.
So I'm gonna give that to you.
Wow.
Oh. He wants to get a picture.
Oh.
Maybe by the light.
Okay,
Is that good?
it's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, this is,
Okay.
I just hope my cats don't break it.
Yeah. All right, Matt. So I'll turn it over to you now, Matt. Thank you very much.
All right, so I just want to thank everybody for giving me this opportunity this morning. It always means a lot to me to be invited back to the church I grew up in, share some of the things I've been doing. And so over the last about 3 years, I've been working with unhoused folks, doing sort of what I would call street ministries. I got into it. I was helping out at Seaside UCC in Torrance, and one of my friends at the church was an unhoused woman. She was living in her van. She was coming to church regularly, and once she got housed, she wanted to go and try to help some of the people in the parking lot that she was living in before she got inside. And so she invited me out, and the two of us started talking to people in their cars. We bought some pizza and we had a meal, and it was a real like positive experience. We started talking about things, what are things we could do as a community to sort of help solve some of these problems. Well, long story short, the kinds of things that I started feeling called to do were not things that were going to happen in the traditional church setting. So we have been reading a devotional about like what to do with your faith, how to live out your faith more. And at the end of the book, it sort of had all of these checklists of things that you should do. And I was like, well, I might as well do it because, what's the point of doing one of these devotionals if you don't listen to any of the advice? And one of the things it said was to go seek out people who are doing the work you wanted to do. So I found some groups that were doing the kind of work that I was doing, and that's sort of how I got into this whole world that we'll be exploring over the next couple of minutes. So it really came from a deep-seated place of me trying to live out my Christian values. The gospel sets a really high bar for how we're expected to treat the poor and the least of these. And I wanted to make the best effort I could as somebody who takes their faith seriously to make a good faith effort to see, okay, well, how much can I do? How much of this is actually doable in the modern world? So that was sort of the real motivator for me. And then a quick word before I sort of get into about the word unhoused, because a lot of you probably are more familiar with the term homeless or person experiencing homelessness. I use the term unhoused for a couple of reasons. One, housing is a simpler idea than home. Home is a really complex idea. And housing is about like a structure that you get into. Home is almost an idea and a concept. And I use the two, I prefer unhoused when I'm working with people on the streets, because everybody who's living on the streets is unhoused. I have met people who do not consider themselves homeless, who are on the street, who, they grew up in the South Bay and this is their home and they feel at home here. Or there's some folks, and these are pretty rare, but they've been on the streets for like 30 years and they've somehow built a home out on the streets, despite all of the challenges and difficulties. And in addition to that, as I've thought a lot about this, homelessness is a much bigger issue. There's a lot of people who are housed who are homeless, right? Who maybe live in a violent home or are living in a space with like 4 other families, and it doesn't work. There's a lot of reasons why you could be homeless. Maybe you can't be who you are because of your sexuality, right? Or whatever the reason is. So it's kind of like a Venn diagram where you have like a big circle that's homeless and a tinier circle that's unhoused, and most of the unhoused circle is in the homeless circle. But I use unhoused for that reason. The other sort of reason is the city regularly talks about housing people. So it's like, these are the people we've housed. So we've housed 100 people this month or whatever. And so sort of the inverse of that is all the people who are still unhoused, right? So it's sort of from a political standpoint puts the emphasis on like, this is sort of what we're arguing for. We're arguing for housing. Like that's what a lot of us are out there fighting for. Okay. So the work I've been doing, the foundation of it is outreach. So outreach is where you go out and you build relationships with unhoused people who are living out on the streets. When you do it, so these are some pictures of me. This is me out on the tracks in Hawthorne, searching for people. This is my rig now. So this is what I do. I go out on Hawthorne Boulevard once a week at least. With supplies now, I've got a lot more than what I used to start. When I used to do it, I would go out with a cooler of ice cold water, and that's what I would walk around with. Now you can see I've got a lot more stuff because I have a lot more resources that I've built up over the last years. And then it's not always fun. You can see on that picture, that is a picture of me doing outreach, and I had just learned from the camp they are getting swept that week, which was the first time I learned that like a camp I had been working with was getting swept. So you're out there to learn what like conditions are like on the streets in your community. So just finding out what's going on with people who are out there. And for me, I was always curious about what the state was doing for them or to them, and also what they aren't doing for them. And then probably most importantly, we're looking for what kind of resources they need. So what are the things that we might be able to do as a community to help support the people on the streets? And I'll say outreach is kind of the foundational practice for all of the other stuff I'm going to be talking about. You can't really do a good job at anything out there until you get out there and start talking to people and know what's going on. So in general, we encourage everybody to go out with a buddy. So it's supposed to be a 2-person system. I will say I'm not good at that. I'm a bigger white male, and that's just a safer place to be than if you're a 100-pound female on the street. So I have that luxury that I can sort of go out on my own and still feel and be safe, whereas other folks maybe not so much. So probably what we spend most of our time doing is mutual aid. So mutual aid is sort of how marginalized communities often care for themselves just like naturally. It's rooted in the understanding that all people have needs and that all people have gifts. So and this sort of contrasts with charity, and this is not to sort of say that charity is bad by any means, but sort of it's more relational versus impersonal. So mutual aid is not about just sort of a transactional. It's about building relationship. It's a tool for connecting people together. And sort of the prime example I give of this is it's the difference between like sitting down with someone and sharing a meal versus just handing them food and leaving, right? So mutual aid is sort of rooted in community and building relationships. So this over here is the table that my group does right now. It's the table that you guys will be raising supplies for if this month in the church. And it has grown a lot from where we started. This happens every Sunday. We pull up with our supplies, we set up the tables, we set up the pop-ups. This is in the camp in Harbor Gateway, near Lameda in Vermont. Yeah. And over here you can see, this is what I've spent though most of my 3 years when I've been doing my mutual aid tabling. You can see there's a table full of electronics in front of you. This is what we call power up table. During COVID, especially, very hard for unhoused people to charge their electrical devices. So you can see down here in the corner, this is the big power unit, and this charges everything that's on the table. It's a giant Duracell unit that's like designed to be plugged into walls for solar panels to charge, and then at the night it runs off of that. I lugged it out to the park and would charge it in my house. We have smaller units too, but in the park I was charging. So I did most of my mutual aid. Oh, for a year I did a mutual aid table and outreach in Westchester Park. There were about 60 people living in the park, and so we would bring out supplies and charge everything because they had luckily, I mean, the park was a nice place to live out on the streets comparatively because they had bathrooms and they had lights at night, and it was more safe in the park, but they didn't have electricity. So that was sort of the big, well, they had water. There was like a hose spigot that they could get water from. So we would do. Yeah, so yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about what we charge. Mostly cell phones. Cell phones were that's why I was out there primarily, is I wanted them to have their phones charged. I wanted them to be documenting alongside me what the state was doing. And I wanted them to be able to call me and text me when things were going on in the park that I was interested in. So I had a bit of a self-interest in there, but also, you know, you identify those areas where what's mutual, right? What's mutual to both of us. So, but I have charged some strange things out on the streets. Anything from bicycles, tools, big speakers, you name it, we've probably charged it. And you pretty much, I would say, once a month you would get somebody with like some strange hookup. They're like, do you have a cord for this? And I'm like, and that I wouldn't, but then Maggie, my partner and girlfriend in all of this, would go and find it that week. So next week we would have that, and by the end of, you know, after a couple months, you have a pretty good setup of what cords are. And then you see a lot of power banks. So these are like those USB things. I would hand out a lot of them. I was doing outreach in the park to supplement the weekly thing. I would charge the power banks at my house and then swap them out. So we would constantly be swapping the power banks so people could keep their phones charged. Yeah, for the most part, I would say, you know, there were some people who would lose them. I mean, things get lost and stolen a lot. That's just a reality. And if you're the kind of person who's going to get like angry about that, it's not going to work. But I would say the vast majority of them wanted they wanted the continued supply, and the way, because of limitations of resources, we didn't have like infinite money to spend. You know, I would buy, like, you know, maybe like each month or every couple of months, I would buy new ones, and that's when I would hand them out to people who didn't already have one. But then throughout the week, if you wanted one, you had to swap with me. It was a trade, a dead one for a live one. So it was sort of an incentive to get back to me. Yeah. So so Unhoused is, mutual aid is informed by what the unhoused community wants and is asking for. So a lot of times you'll see groups coming in, they already have the idea of what they're going to do for the unhoused people before they even meet the community they're going to be serving. And that sometimes can work because there's some things that are kind of universally needed. Socks. Everybody needs socks everywhere. Never been to a community, an encampment that didn't need socks. But you know, if for example, over here, we don't do power up. They have electricity over here. A lot of them do. Or have other ways of getting it that they don't need from the community. In the park, they didn't. Over here, they need a lot more. They get swept pretty much every week. So there's a lot more things that they need that get thrown away by the city each week. So, you know, we always have a lot of clothes because people's clothes get thrown away a lot. So you got to try to replace those things. So, and mutual aid is sort of just about working together to meet the basic needs of the community. So things like shelter, food, bathrooms, hygienes, clothes, and electricity. That's sort of what we've been working on. And so that's my partner Maggie right there. And this is Trey. He was one of the folks who lived in the park. And so it's not just material things too that mutual aid is about. It's also helping people with other kinds of things. Like, so Maggie right now is helping him sign up for his COVID stimulus check, right? So something that'd be really difficult to do if you don't have a laptop. But fortunately, you know, laptop and up to the table regularly to do those kinds of things. We also help people sign up EBT, you know, food stamps, and help them get IDs, and essentially help them sort of navigate the surprisingly difficult you have to access to get benefits. Let's just yeah. So asking about how do you do any of this without an address, right? So that is another problem that we face. I try to set boundaries. I listen to some of the folks who came before me and about setting boundaries with the folks you're working with. I don't like to receive people's mail and using my address because my goal out there was trying to build like positive relationships with people, and getting between people and their money is a way to like really damage a relationship and make it so people resent you and don't and so I was always very cognizant about not trying to get between money and folks on the street. There are some like NGOs, non-government organizations that will provide addresses for people, and with mixed results. You know, sometimes it will take weeks to months to get them their mail. So some people are hesitant to use those things. Some people, you know, even if they can't live with their family or friends, they might be able to use their address. So I know a lot of people have like, this is my mom's address or this is my sister's address, and they'll get my mail from me. Yeah, but it is a struggle. We've looked into PO boxes. It's kind of one of those things where there's not an easy answer that I've discovered yet. So and I just sharing some pictures. This is on Beacon Street in San Pedro, where we did one of our early power up. You can see the ones I don't run are much neater and cleaner than the ones I do run. But Hillary right there sitting at the table, she was one of the early members of what at that time was Street Watch South Bay. You can sort of see in the sign down there. And she did a lot of work in San Pedro where she lived, and we were out there monthly supporting her, doing her work. And then here you can see the other encampments I've worked at. This is on the canals out in Hawthorne and Gardena on the border there. We were out there for about 6 months. On the other side, that's me at Hawthorne by the Costco. That was actually our first ever table that we did. So that was like a real proud, happy moment for me. A lot of outreach and work went into that to get to that point. And then in the center, this is during there was a community that was living there. So one of the things that has changed a lot over the last 3 years is when I started doing it, COVID had just sort of started taking off, right? I remember we all paused because we were like afraid of catching COVID. And so we sort of stopped doing outreach for a little bit. We're trying to figure out like what we doing. And then I caught COVID and I was like, well, I already got it. So now I can just go back out and do the work. So, but that's why you see a lot of masks and stuff in this. But the city of LA and a lot of cities sort of had slowed down their enforcement during COVID. They were trying to get people to shelter in place. And so forcing people to move was kind of counter to the agenda of what COVID was pushing. So, okay, so that's mutual aid. The other, another thing I've been working a lot on is sweep defense, sweep support, and sweep monitoring. So a sweep is the practice of the state enforcing unhoused people to move everything they own so that it doesn't get thrown away. So this can sort of take two forms. One is a sort of temporary where they rope everything off, make everybody move what they want to hold on to, and then trash everything else. And then you're allowed to come back. And then sometimes it's an eviction. So it's move everything you have. And if you come back, we're going to enforce other laws on you that require, that will probably lead to your arrest for most folks. So sweep support is sort of part of it is raising awareness about sweeps and about the notices. So you can see over here, this is what a sweep notice would have looked like at Westchester Park, which this is from Parks and Recs. So it looks a little bit different than what you would see at like a city sweep. This meant a bad week for everyone, including myself. So if you saw that, you want to make sure everybody's aware that a sweep is coming, because the last thing you want is people to find out the morning of that a sweep is coming. So we also help people move their belongings. So we'll show up early in the morning. Sometimes we'll rent trucks. Sometimes we'll use normally we'll use our own vehicles because we don't have a ton of money. And we just get people out of the zone that they're going to be sweeping in. And this usually, I will say, requires moving stuff about 300 yards. So not an insignificant amount of space. And then we also do things like providing supplies and equipment. So like gloves, trash bags, carts, things like that we can get out there to people so that they can help move their stuff. And then also one of the things we've started doing is providing food on sweep days, because one of the things we heard was you wake up early in the morning, you move all of your stuff, you deal with the city during the afternoon, and then you move all your stuff in the evening, and there's not a lot of time to figure out food in between there. So we've been providing like donuts in the morning, a light lunch in the afternoon, and a dinner in the evening. And we've been doing our best to get that done for most sweeps. And then, so that's sweep support. And then there's sweep defense and monitoring. So support is all about just helping the residents survive and get through the sweep. Sweep defense and monitoring is about pushing back against and resisting the state. I've never done a block, but people in my coalition have blocked sweeps before. And so defense is sort of actively resisting sweeps, slowing them down, de-escalating the situation, protesting, and trying to stop the sweeps. And the best way we've seen to stop sweeps through like direct action, get there early, get there with more numbers than the sanitation people have, and just stand in the way. So do not and refuse to move. So force them to arrest you if they want to do the sweep. And if you get enough people there, they are not interested in arresting you. They will just call the sweep off. So yeah, okay. So who runs a sweep? Good question. So who is they? So there's two. Most sweeps, there are two government agencies there. There are the sanitation workers. So that's LA Sanitation or Caltrans workers or whoever's actually going to be doing the cleaning work. And almost always are some form of police presence. So there are some sweeps that do not have police presence, but the vast majority of them do. And so at sweeps, usually one of the sanitation directors is in charge of what sort of is directing going on. And they will reach out to the police if they need the police for something. So for example, if we're standing in the way of sanitation workers from getting to a tent, they would be the ECI would call the police over to do us. And so like all of the tapes and stuff you see out, those are usually put up by the sanitation workers. That's their line of, we don't want any of the public beyond this spot. And so then the police will enforce that line. Yeah. Okay, so the question is, why is the
we'd like to
sweep a
see
bad
this,
thing?
we'd like to see this trash off the street. That's our feeling, right? And so would the city. So can you explain why it shouldn't be removed or?
Yeah, so yeah, I can talk to a little bit about why sweeps are bad. So sweeps are, like you said, sort of in theoretically about cleaning, right? So they're about getting trash off of the streets. The problem with sweeps is they don't really work at that. Go to an encampment after a sweep and it looks just as bad as it did the day before. If you want to get trash out of an encampment, the best way to do that is to provide a dumpster, right? If you provided sanitation, 90% of your problems will go away. I'll add too that a lot of the trash you see at homeless encampments or unhoused encampments, a chunk of them are people illegally dumping. So there's a, if you sit at an encampment and you just wait for 3 hours, you will see somebody pull up and throw something out of their car into the trash pile, right? So that's why sweeps really aren't good at cleaning, to be honest. They don't, they go into an encampment after a sweep, more broken glass on the ground. There's going to be more litter spread around. Yes, they will large bags of trash that people set aside. So they're not great at cleaning. There are better ways to clean, I guess is the first answer. The more why sweeps that is, they're incredibly traumatic to the people who experience them. So imagine somebody showing up 2 days from now, you have to move everything you own and we're going to throw away everything you don't move. And you don't have a car. Some people don't even have bikes. And you don't really have everyone you know who's your friend is going through the exact same thing you are. So they don't have time to help you. And so you pack up what you can day of because you don't have anywhere to, it's not like you can, if they were to move their stuff 2 days before, a day before, a lot of it would get stolen. So one of the biggest problems on the street is you got a lot of desperate people out there and they're going to look out for themselves. And so there's, while I will say unhoused people in general are no more likely to steal your stuff, housed people's stuff, than the average person, everyone knows that they can grab things from unhoused people and there's no consequences. So there's a lot more of like transient folks who aren't camp will come and take people's stuff, or even inter-community stuff. That's one of the things that I work a lot on trying to prevent, is by providing stuff you hope people don't steal from each other and they can build relationships with each other that will strengthen. But sweeps are traumatic and you lose a lot of stuff. I know people who have lost their IDs in sweeps, their birth certificates in sweeps, their medication in sweeps, their tents are regularly destroyed in sweeps because they're hard to break down and they're hard to move. And when you've got somebody screaming at you that you've got 15 minutes to move or we're going to arrest you, you grab the stuff that you can. And so they really set people back on the streets. Like if your goal is to get people into housing, if your goal is to help people get out of the situation they're in, sweeps are like knocking them back 3 pegs, right? So it's just it's hard on the people who are there. And almost always, right, at best, if it's an eviction sweep, you've got a new encampment 3 blocks down, right? So it's like kind of like whack-a-mole. Like you hit one encampment and another one pops up because these people are not getting housed, the sweeps. Now, the city will sometimes, so for example, I have a slide of, yeah, so this is Westchester Park. So this was the final sweep of Westchester Park when they were evicting everybody at Westchester Park. Mike Bonin, I don't know if any of you guys follow like LA politics, but Mike Bonin's one of the more like liberal friendly people, and Westchester is his district. And he, in his sweep of the park, at the very least, offered hotel rooms to all of the residents. So we were making sure they were getting into hotel rooms. And then hopefully the promise was permanent housing. I followed a lot of those folks through their journey. I would say about a third of them got into permanent housing, which is astronomically good for what the city normally does. Most of the time, no shelter of any kind is offered. If you ask for shelter, right, they'll be like, okay, well, we'll try to find you something. Be back here in an hour or two. Never come back, because part of the reason they never come back is there's just no room. Shelters are almost all full. Tiny homes are all full. There's just no place to put people, and that's why a lot of these sweeps get rape unconstitutional. On the West Coast, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, there is a ruling, Martin v. Boise, the city of Boise, and the Ninth Circuit Court said you can't cite people or arrest people for being in, like, for living in public, unless you have some place to put them, like unless you have an alternative for them. If there's no legal place for them to go, you can't cite them for not having a place to go. And so and sweeps, you know, are sort of the spearhead of what we in the movement call the criminalization of poverty. So there's all of these laws and rules that are used towards the poor and those living on the streets that are really just like not helpful at all, and are designed to do, you know, like, for example, here in the beach cities and in the South Bay, right? We're not city of LA. And pretty much every city, the attitude I've encountered with them from the government is, this is a city of LA problem. We're too small to deal with this, not our problem. So their strategy is to push unhoused people out of their communities, right? So Hawthorne, Torrance, and El Segundo are sort of the border cities, and they are the ones that actually get people, unhoused people, coming into their communities in and out. And you know, you hear, I mean, you're going to see in a minute. So maybe I'll just save this for that section. But they're not friendly. It's not a friendly interaction. So yeah, sweeps are bad because they hurt unhoused people and they're ineffective at what their goals are set. So they're bad policy. And so you can just see here at bigger sweeps, there's the other agencies that are involved. So you've got some folks who are from, I believe those are PATH folks. So that's an NGO, People Assisting the Homeless, I believe is what PATH stands for. These are kinds of like caseworkers you hope are out there doing the stuff you want them to be doing. LASA is what the county's sort of caseworkers are. I have a very poor opinion of LASA. I don't see them doing a good job. I don't see them following up with their, when I was in the park, I never had a LASA person do anything for anybody. PATH, on the other hand, PATH would at least like take people to go get their IDs and things like that. There were, PATH actually helped. PATH was the first agency I ever saw get somebody into housing, which, you know, that's what we're pushing for. A lot of times you hear a narrative in the media that the left, the activists, right? We want people out on the streets. That is a complete lie. All of us are fighting to get our friends and the people we meet out there inside into permanent real housing. So, but there's PATH, there's Bonin's people. These are people from city council. And then there's another, there's actually in this circle, which is becoming more common, there is a group of, another group called, these were called grassroots neighbors. So this is sort of a more liberal community group that was helping in the park as well, that I had up until that point been working with. And then the other sort of, the thing that I've been spending a lot of time doing at sweeps is monitoring. So monitoring is the practice of filming what's going on, filming and documenting state violence at sweeps. We do this for a couple of reasons. The government is more accommodating when being filmed, so they are less harsh on people when they're being filmed. Like instead of saying, no, you can't go back and get your tent and pull it out, they will say, oh no, go ahead, you know, because they want to look good in case this ever gets anywhere. We know this is true because our residents, the people who are living in the encampments, tell us that this is the case, that when we're not there, they are much more aggressive, hostile, and less accommodating. We particularly were filming for lawsuits. So Garcia versus the city of LA is a current case that's going on. And Judge Carter told the lawyers that they needed to get footage from 100 sweeps to prove what we were saying was happening. And they didn't think we could do it, but we organized and we got footage from 100 different sweeps. So we could show the city what we were doing. And this was primarily evolving around them throwing. So the city used to have, and I don't think they do this anymore because we won. But if it couldn't fit in a 60-gallon bin or something, they could just throw it away. They wouldn't have to store it. And this is a violation of your constitutional rights. You have a right not to have your property seized by the government and improperly. That's a constitutional right. So that's one of the reasons why fortunately, I'm kind of notorious for boring sweeps. Like when I'm there, the sweeps, nothing exciting or interesting happens except for, unless you're interested in people's stuff getting thrown away, which no one is. Sweeps are really unfun and you have to wake up early for them. But you saw Hillary there earlier. Hillary was documenting a lot of the sweeps that were going down in San Pedro. And because of that, she actually had to give a deposition. So that's one of the reasons why we monitor. And then the other is just sort of a general, it's a form of holding the state accountable and resisting, showing people that we are opposed to sweeps, that sweeps are, we don't want sweeps happening in our community and resisting them. So go ahead. Yeah. So. Yeah. Yeah. So the question is, are there positive alternatives? And if we clean up the day before, will a sweep not happen? We do community cleanups all the time, partly because the city is not great at it. They will sweep you anyways. We have gotten the camps perfect, crystal clean sweeping. Yeah, no, maybe you could have that, but that's not how it works now. We have worked with the city on trying to create more helpful sweeps. Like all of us will ask for sanitation. We want someone to come up and clean the trash up. The residents want that, the activists want that, and the community want that. The city will claim that this is enabling homelessness, that if you provide sanitation services, you are justifying the encampment's existence. And people don't want the encampment there, right? That's what the neighbors and the housed folks generally will say. Then we often will pejoratively call people who oppose us NIMBYs, not in our backyard, because they're more concerned about what's going on in their housing prices and their comfort than what's going on with the people who are struggling on the streets. So sanitation is important, and everybody who encounters the real solution though is housing, right? So the real solution is getting people out of these circumstances. We don't. I had a lot of trepidation in my work. One of the things that is a real tension is the short-term goals of I want to help people and meet their immediate needs and build, but I don't want to build a better slum. That's not what I came here to do. I didn't come here to build a better slum. I want to improve the living conditions of people outside, but we want to put the emphasis on this isn't where people should be. And we have all the tools and resources we need to make this go away. So all we need to do is just have the will to actually do it. So Well, yeah, so asking what are the tools and resources that we have that can get people into housing? Yeah. So there are more vacancies in city of LA than there are unhoused people. So that's just like starting point number one. There's enough space in the city to house everybody. That is currently in the county. Well, the short answer is money and politics, right? Oh, how I'm doing. Oh, I mean, us as a community and as a city. So, if we wanted to house everybody, and we put aside, you know, our our property right centric view of this is the most sacred thing in our society, right? We cannot violate people's property rights. We could house everybody. We also have the money. We spend billions of dollars on all kinds of things, including homelessness in our city, to build housing, right? There are all kinds of vacant lots all throughout the South Bay, through LA County, that if we wanted to, we could build public housing. We just aren't doing it. We've known this problem has existed for 30 plus years in LA, and we're, as a community, content to keep people out on the streets. Yeah. Okay, so the question is, what do we do with people who don't don't want to live, don't want housing? Okay, so I've met two people out of the thousands of people I've met who fall into this category. One took housing when he was offered it, so I think he lied to me. Yeah. But the other one is a vagabond, spiritless. He lives in a van. He's like 85, and he's just never had roots. He's the kind of person who goes where the wind blows. What do we? I mean, I think at the end of the day, we could leave Bob alone, and he would probably not hurt anyone. You know, but for so I would just say that's not actually a problem. That is such a minority of people. The real problem is, and what they call, these are what they will dub people service resistant. So they're people who are refusing the services that are being offered them. Now, there are a lot of people who will refuse some of the services that are offered them because the services have some pretty deep flaws for them, right? So, for example, how many of you guys have heard of tiny homes, right? Tiny homes, one of the big things the city is doing to try to, I call them tiny sheds because they're like an 8x8 shed that they've turned into a home. Doesn't have a kitchen, doesn't have a bathroom. You can't have people over. Doesn't sound like a home to me. I wouldn't want to live there permanently. And there are a lot of rules that come with living in these places. Like I said, you can't have company. There's a curfew. So if you work at night, this place doesn't work for you. You can't. If you are late coming home, you're out on the streets all night without any of your stuff, right? So you lose a lot of your freedom and agency when you go into some of these places. A lot of folks who are on the streets are coming out of prison and jail, and this will re-trigger them, right? Like jail is a traumatic place, and if you're sent to a place that's not exactly like jail but similar to jail in the sense that like there's a lot of control on what you do and what you can't do, that's going to be traumatizing and difficult for people. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think part of it's rules, but I mean, like, you know, for example, I don't know how many of you guys have ever tried to fit everything you own into 2 bags. 2 bags, everything you own into 2 bags. I couldn't do it, and that's what they ask people who are going, like family heirlooms, you know, clothing, anything you love, or you know, we love, you know, we have items that are important to us, and I can't fit everything into 2 bags, and most of these people can't fit anything into 2 bags. So then you're asking people to make some really like hard sacrifices. So that might be another reason why somebody might be resistant. And I'll add to that the city isn't always a good and honest player in a lot of this. A lot of times they will make promises to people that they do not fulfill. So for example, at the tiny sheds, one of the things they promised people who would move there is wraparound services. So things like mental health services, education, job training. None of it has happened, right? None of it has happened. So when you constantly get lied to, when you constantly get misled, you're not going to trust the city as much, especially when the city is coming around every week in the rain, in the cold, forcing you to move, taking your stuff. You start really building an antagonistical relationship with the city. So, okay, I do want to get, I'm just looking at the time and I do want to get through just, I'm going to run through my thing a little bit and then we'll do some more questions. Okay, if that's all right. So I also do harm reduction. Harm reduction is preventing overdose and disease. So as everyone knows, there's an opioid crisis going through our communities. Fentanyl is a very deadly drug that kills people. Fentanyl sometimes is taken intentionally, but a lot of the times it's taken unintentionally. It gets mixed with other drugs. Fortunately, there is a life-saving miracle drug. This is called Narcan. It will reverse an opioid overdose. So it's a nasal spray. It also comes in you can inject it, but we do the nasal spray because it's really easy. And you just stick it up someone's nose, spray, wait 2 minutes. If they don't turn around, stick it up the other dose up their nose, spray, and keep doing that until they come back or the EMTs get there. So this saves lives. We hand this stuff out everywhere we go, and we hear all the time of how I brought my friend back because of this. So this is something that is we always make a real strong effort. You know, you saw my wagon out there. My wagon always has Narcan in it. We also provide clean needles and sharp containers, drug testing kits. So this will help you test your drugs to see if there is fentanyl in it. So it can warn you so that you don't accidentally consume something you're not trying to. And then we also provide sanitary equipment so that people don't spread disease. So that's been a real, especially with COVID, we were really trying to focus on disease and reducing the spread of diseases. So that's a harm reduction. So the big thing I do, this is sort of my, I guess, my bread and butter, what my seminary training has helped me with, I guess. Some of the tools I bring to it is community building. So one of the things that, we're talking about non-material things that people need on the streets. The biggest they have is they don't have a sense of, there's no community out there. So people are alienated when they're on the streets, they're removed. So there's a big gap between housed people and unhoused people. Housed people are told that unhoused people are dangerous and unsafe to be around, that if you're near them, they're gonna, yell at you and attack you and shoot you up with fentanyl, right? That's the narrative, which is, never been shot up with fentanyl, never been attacked on the streets. I have felt unsafe once and been unsafe twice while I was out on the streets for 3 years. When you consider your day-to-day life, that's, over 3 years, you find yourself in unsafe places and you feel yourself in danger at times. But I think that narrative, but it has created a real gap between the two communities. So one of the things we work on is both building a sense of community for unhoused people to have amongst themselves, right? So introducing people, you'd be surprised how people can live in the same encampment, the same park, and not know each other. These are some of the residents from, beautiful group of people. That's a power up table. We always bring drinks, chairs. We want people to sit down, hang out with us and talk, get to know each other. And over here, this is we did a fundraiser that was streamed during COVID because we couldn't have like a physical concert. We did it streaming online, and we brought a TV out to the park so that people could watch the streaming service for, because we had one of the residents in the park was showing her art during the presentation, and so things like that, just to bring, and one of the things they didn't have in the park was TV. So when we brought the TV out, everybody crowded around because they hadn't, they don't normally get to watch TV and they don't really, so it's like one of those things that, and then we also do art projects. So this is a banner we were making with the community in the Harbor Gateway. One of the encampments over where I live, La Cienega and Century, got swept, and we were making a banner in solidarity. So one of the things we're trying to work on is creating a sense of community across encampments, so that unhoused people feel supported by their fellow unhoused people. And then over here, this is the project. We've got a student from LMU and one of the residents in the park working on our community cabinet. So this is a place where we can build community projects together. So this is where we would put our hygiene supplies for the park and encourage other members in the community to bring supplies for the folks in the park. So this was a community cabinet we set up at Westchester Park. Yeah, so the goal is to build community amongst each other and also bridge that gap between housed and unhoused so that you know, people can feel loved. I mean, that's like a fundamental need for all human beings, right? It's one of those untangible things. But Tangi, the woman who introduced me to all of this, the first thing she told me was, it's being unhoused is so weird because you're invisible, people ignore you, but you live in public, so you have no privacy. And that there's this weird tension where you both have to live among everybody, but you don't get to be a part of everybody. And how alienating, and that she said that was the hardest part for her. So that was sort of pushing back. Also, as you sort of gotten through some of the questions, answering some of the questions, we spent a lot of time advocating and organizing. So, you know, one of the things me and my group and the people I work with, we're very, as it sort of has been revealed, opposed to sweeps. We want to end sweeps, and we don't think it's a helpful practice, and we want better alternatives to replace sweeps. So one of the things we did, I spent a lot of time working with calling into and trying to get the city of Hawthorne, that's where I live, that's where I'm a resident, to stop sweeps, and with no success, unfortunately. But we did a lot of good work, and one of the things we did was we made this video, which we eventually got invited because it was an election year, and one of the city council people was running against the mayor, so they were like fighting with each other. They wanted to make each other look bad, so one of them invited us to try to make the mayor look bad, and we were going to play this video. They actually refused to play this. The city controller lied to us, said they had technical difficulties, but we got screenshots of his emails saying that he was going to refuse to play it because of the content of the video. And he got fired eventually, but not for that. So but I'm gonna play the video real quick so you guys can see.
My name is Felipe Solares.
Why are you here at this encampment?
Because I don't have a place to live. Before, I have 2 pizzerias.
I'm a Marine Corps vet. I got out of the Corps after 8 years, and I was doing good. You know, it's a weird thing about it is like whenever something goes bad, like drastically in your life, that changes your whole life, it seems like everything else falls back. Everything just crumbles around you, everything.
I'm here because I'm homeless. Lost my job.
Well, I'm at this encampment because we got kicked out of our last encampment. I have no idea where I'm going tomorrow.
I don't have no place to go. I don't have nothing.
Really, no set place to go. Everywhere we go, we're gonna get chased out anyways.
Getting kicked out like that is just makes us feel like divided from everyone else.
Basically, every time they kick us out, you know, they basically take everything. Sometimes they give us enough time. Sometimes they just show up and just bulldoze everything, and it's over, just like that.
It's already hard enough having stuff out here. It may take somebody 4 or 5 months to get a tent, and then you lose your tent. Not everyone has ways to transport things. Some people are walking.
And I'm already stressed out. I got 3 kids. I'm going to be 40. But a lot of people don't know what help is.
There's a lot, you know, they can do to help us. Portable showers, you know.
Put a dumpster up here, a couple porta potties, you have no problem ever. We're not killing people. We're just trying to be left alone. That's all.
If they could stop harassing us, it'd be great. But I mean, I went to the Marine Corps because my plans were to become an officer one day, a cop. You know? But I lost faith in that a long time ago. You know what I'm saying? I've had cops literally take money that I have in my pocket and put the rest in their pocket, just like that. You know, and it's like, what the hell? You know, there's a few sheriffs that are brutal, man.
I think for them, we don't count. We don't count nothing.
I mean, it's not a usual home for anybody, but it's our home, you know. And we do our best to keep it clean, just like anyone else would do with their home, you know.
Okay, so even though the city didn't see that, 35,000 people did. One of the nice things about organizing together, working across the county, is you can build big resources that every sort of individual group can use. So at its peak, Streetwatch had 250 members, and we worked all across the county from San Pedro to the valley, from the west side to the east side, just like Randy Newman says, right? And so we had big resources. One of the things that's hard, Streetwatch has since collapsed. One of the things that's hard now without Streetwatch is, financially we are not where we used to be as an organization. Oops, trying to go to the next slide. Okay, there we are. The public funded Streetwatch. So I don't know if you guys knew, but 2020 there was this big movement called Black Lives Matters that really activated the left, and that's when we went from an organization of 50 people to an organization of 200 people in about a couple months. People wanted to get activated. They wanted to do something to better their community. They wanted to push back against some of the political problems they were seeing in the world. Also, what you saw is a lot of people started throwing around a lot of money to give out to groups like this. So I was one of my organizing responsibilities was I was the budget coordinator for Streetwatch for the whole organization. We raised during my what it was 11 months over $150,000, and used it to we used all of it too. One of the things about when you give to organizations like us, none of us take salaries, none of us take a cut. All of the money goes to resources that are helping people on the streets. You can argue whether we're helping them or not, but we at least spend the money on what we say we are. We buy tents, we buy water, we buy sleeping bags, we buy community cabinets to help people. We buy power up, all that power up stuff. We bought the jackeries and the power units, all that kind of stuff. So that's where a lot of that money went to. A small amount of it would go to things like stickers or trying to what we would call maybe cause awareness materials that were helping people, like services not sweeps logos or stuff like that. So but the vast majority of it is used. And then so the other thing we did a lot of is protests and making our sort of our demands known publicly and showing our numbers. So this is a protest at Echo Park that we organized during 2020. We had so many people that we took the streets around the park. We wrapped all the way around Echo Park. If you know Echo Park, we had tens of thousands of people there probably marching to end sweeps and the criminalization of poverty. And then over here you can see a much smaller type of protest. This is one that I organized on my with just my group, not all of when we did this, it was Streetwatch partnered with Black Lives Matter. So we had a much bigger megaphone, much bigger that we were reaching out to. This was Super Bowl Sunday. I was working with an encampment on Century in La Cienega. My good friend Dawn, she's the first person I ever met doing outreach. I mean, her still friends. I met her. I was talking to her yesterday. We went up to the valley to see her. We organized a protest for the Super Bowl. They got swept because the city didn't want people walking by a homeless encampment on their way to SoFi Stadium because the parking and the stadium, the encampment was in between. So they swept all the people there. We protested and essentially was the demand was like, we're not invisible. We're not going to be swept under the rug. We're going to, we have rights. We're human beings. And, we had a statement that the community wrote that we were handing out. So we do things like that. And as people walked to the Super Bowl, we were handing out and doing the signs. Okay, so I have gotten through all my slides. Now we can go back to questions. So we've got about unhoused people voting. What? Yeah, okay, yeah. So some of them do. Um we do voter registration as part of the stuff that we do at the table. It is, as you know, more challenging when it's, transportation is always an issue getting to the polls. But yeah, some unhoused people vote. Our mission for Street Watch, part of what we were trying to do was build coalitions of unhoused people. So the only sort of successful effort I know of that though is ATTACK, which is Unhoused People Against Carceral Housing, I think is what ATTACK stands for. And they're a group of formerly unhoused and unhoused people who advocate for their own rights in City Hall. So we support. UTAC was at the Valley event yesterday. So oh, it's really coming down out there, huh? Okay. But as far as voting goes, it's kind of tricky. There is not a lot of in the city of LA. Question is like, who do you vote for? Is a hard one to answer. Yeah. Yeah. I don't meet a lot of kids on the streets. If you have a child on the street, they will take it away and put it into or they will make an effort to house those people, and children get the highest priority, fortunately. I've only encountered children living in RVs. So that's the only place I've encountered children. Demographics on unhoused people. Mostly men, but there are a significant amount of women. As we know, homelessness is one of those things that affects groups that are most marginalized. So racism plays a big role, right? So you're going to have more African Americans and Latinos on the streets than white people, which is true in my experience. Transgendered and gay people, less as our society moves more towards accepting homosexuality, less people are kicking their kids out of their homes because they're gay. You still see that on the streets though. Trans folks, not so much. You'd be shocked how many trans folks are on the streets. That's like the population that they make up. In Westchester Park, out of the 60 people, 4 of them were transgendered, right? So if you just think about like, it's highly disproportional. The one that shocked me the most, elderly. Elderly are one of the biggest groups. Social services does not provide enough to live off of in our county. So you get that. And then the other one is disabled people. So if you have a physical disability that prevents you from working, disability, not enough money to live in LA. So you're on the streets. Yeah. So dogs and animals. A lot of people have animals on the streets. It's because people are hungry for agape love, and a dog or a cat will give you that when people won't. And so a lot of people have dogs. Also, a lot of women use dogs for safety. I know a lot of women who have a big dog in their tent with them in a way. Yeah, it does cost some money to keep the dogs. And we, one of the things we do, we provide dog food and cat food and vet services for people. That's one of the things we work hard at because our unhoused, the best part about doing outreach, in my opinion, is meeting all the animals that you meet. They have accepted housing. I was talking about Dawn, my friend. She and her husband at the time had 3 dogs, and they wanted them to give rid of the dogs to get housing. That Mike, her husband, was sick and dying and needed to get off the streets immediately. And they didn't want to get rid of the dogs, so they weren't able to get housing because of it. Now I do see, like, for example, any of you guys have heard Karen's Inside Safe project that she's been doing, Mayor Bass's? she has been finding hotels that accept dogs for people who have dogs. So they aren't being asked to give away their pets. You know, I'm pretty sympathetic to that. I grew up with dogs. Like if you asked me to give up my dog, it'd be like asking me to give up like my brother or like no, like this becomes family, right? For some of us, our animals become family. My cats, I mean, I wouldn't move anywhere where I couldn't bring my cats with me right now. So it's a really like what you're touching upon is sort of the essence of my philosophy versus the city's philosophy, which is or what I perceive the city's philosophy to be, which is you should take what we offer you, whatever it is. And my philosophy is let's find a place that works for you, right? Well, let's like find a place that, you know, we know that people on the streets are going through trauma. You get on the streets because of trauma, right? That's why you're there. You're not there because you choose. No one chooses to go out and live on the streets. That you're there because, you know, a divorce or a fire. I've met climate G refugees on the street. Someone who's lost their house in the Thomas fire, right? You know, a disability. That's a big one. If you can't work anymore, boom. Sometimes it's drug addiction. Addiction is a real hard problem for people to deal with. It's traumatic. It's hard, and there's not a lot of sympathy in our society for people who are struggling with it. Mental illness. Oh my God, mental illness is a huge one. If you don't have some form of mental illness that got you on the street, the trauma of the street is going to drive you into some really unhealthy mental spaces. And there's nothing there for, so, you know, that's where I want to get us to, is a place where we are meeting people where they're at and serving them, you know, like instead of saying, well, why aren't you better? Why aren't you taking it? Like, why are you having these problems? Instead being, how do we build a community that can serve and address these problems? And, you know, and that comes from my Christian faith, right? Like, I'm not here to judge people when I go out on the streets. There are some things I've met people who, quite frankly, I think are bad people and I don't want to help. But that's not why I'm out there. I'm not there to judge people. I'm not out there to be a sense of like morality or anything. My job is to try to show people love and show people support, right? Why I'm out there. Did I do a decent job? I know we were supposed to be talking about dogs. Okay. Okay. Oh, so there's socks over here? Like I said, infinite amount of socks. They're literally, I could bring out, I mean, we've had Heinz mail us box. I mean, one of the things that, you know, I don't deal with as much as my partner does. Maggie does a lot of the securing of supplies. And our apartment is always so many boxes everywhere. Tents, batteries, blankets, hygiene, you know, you name it, we get it shipped to our house. But yeah, socks are one of those things, like you could send me a box every week and I would be able to move them. So. They probably know. That's right. Yeah, cool. Yeah, great. Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. Uh-huh. No, no, we're not. Oh, I honestly don't know. I know one of the models that like I look to for like, oh wow, I wish we could have that is Vienna in Austria. They have a public housing program that is just like amazing. Like if you want to see public housing done right, right? It's universal. Everybody lives in it. So I mean, you don't have to, but it is nice housing. Movie stars in Austria live in public housing in Austria, right? Because it's so nice and there's a lot of services there. There's a lot of community services. you see things like, I don't know if any of you have been down to like, to like Playa Vista, where they have the like housing on top and the stores on bottom, and it's like five, right? Like it's kind of stuff like that, but like instead of it just being stores, there's like services and community stuff, like, like libraries. So as far as housing in the world, I don't know. I mean, that's probably a question like, I'm guessing like one of the Saudi states has zero homelessness because they just like have so much money and they can build kind of whatever they want. But I wish I had a better answer for you. Just so you know, I'm not an expert on any of this stuff. Like, there are people who I organize with who have their PhD in this, and like, I usually listen to them when they tell me stuff because, like, I don't know. Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, public housing can be can become problematic. I think what we would need to do is honestly like fund and use them. One of the problems is, when you make something that is segregatory, right? So like if only poor people, only disadvantaged people are living somewhere. I mean, we know this with schools, right? If you have a school and you fill them with people who are struggling, that's going to tax resources, right? The goal is ultimately to have like community housing that lots of people live in, right? So like my dream is to tear down the Hawthorne Mall and build a community center there that houses students that go to El Camino, houses elderly people, houses unhoused people, houses people who are, struggling just in the community, like anybody who really needs those resources. If you make it so that it's not accessible to the whole community, you're going to start getting these cycles where, okay, well, it's not working, so we're going to fund it less, and it's not working, so we're going to fund it less, and then it gets to a point where nobody's really doing anything there, and it makes it susceptible to criminal. So yeah, if you build a giant tower and you don't make sure that the people there are getting served and that we're not building each other up and we're not supporting each other, you're gonna let negative parts take over, and that to me that's a right, like you don't give up on something because it failed one time, right? Like we have to perfect it, we have to get better at it, and we have models, like I said, the Vienna model, that show that you can do it right. So yeah, I mean, I know that public housing is my answer. I think there's literally dozens of ways you could house people in LA County. There are so many ways you could do it. The problem is we're not doing any of those things, and so that's sort of that. We've got, I think, time for maybe one more. Okay, go ahead. So my current outreach right now that I'm doing in Hawthorne on Hawthorne Boulevard meets more folks like that, actually. So it's been something I'm learning about. So I don't know if I have any great answers for you. Some of these people, I think, I met one guy, he doesn't want to talk. He sleeps out in front of my 99-cent store. And occasionally I'll try to make another effort, but it's always leave me alone. And when people tell me to leave me alone, I leave them alone because that's their right. Nobody has any requirement to talk to me or interact with me. I think, those people, I don't believe that people are ever too far gone to be healed. I have great faith in Christ's power and the power of agape to transform. But I will say, we should never be letting people get that far. And those are the folks who have been out on the streets probably for years. And they have been they're alone because people have probably harmed them more often than helped them in their experience. And that's like a real hard thing to untrain or unlearn, right? Is, they might have been let down by and I'm not trying to make them all like victims in this. Some of these people have chosen things that have alienated them from their families, right? They have done real harm to their families, and there's a reason why their families don't want to help them anymore. But I think as a community, as a state, we have a responsibility that irregardless of, people's mental conditions and people's emotional conditions, to still help them. Like even if like I said, there's a lot of demonization of drug users. Like they don't deserve help, they don't deserve love, they don't deserve our compassion. I don't buy that. I've met a lot of great drug users that I want to stay alive, that I want to see get off of drugs and live a full, happy life. But yeah, for people who are, those people, I'm still trying to crack the nut as how to like best help them and serve them. So I was really.
Thank you so much. This was fabulous.
Thank you guys for having me.
What is the name of your organization? I don't know that I caught that.
So the current group I organize with is called South Bay Community Care. Sorry, South Bay Mutual Aid and Community Care.
Okay.
We just call it SBMAC. So sometimes I have to remember what all the letters stand for. I used to work with Street Watch LA, but we got dissolved. One of the things you'll learn about the left is their groups don't last very long. For whatever reasons.
Well, thank you
yeah.
for your work and thank you for speaking. I just want to announce for next week, Katie Klopp and Sebastian Young, who are two new members of our church, will be sharing their background, careers, passions, and faith journey. You may recognize Katie's name because she was the one who designed the Lenten booklet that we're kind of going through over Lent. And they're both on the communication board.
Be careful with those Linda practices.
And just a couple of other questions. I'm going to pass the mic.
Oh, just one thing. We are partnering with Matt now this month to do a spring supply drive. So you'll see some more information coming out in the bulletins next week in the preview, but I put a few flyers over on the table for you with the list of things that they're looking for, things that Matt mentioned during his talk. And we're going to be collecting those in the church office. I'm going to put a bin up there for any day of the week you want to drop them by. And then I'll have a bin out on Sunday mornings the rest of the month for you to donate. And, please help us start off our partnership with Matt and donate some supplies. I'm going to try to challenge the different groups in the church to have every group provide a tent, because as Matt shared, that's something tough for them to get, and obviously something that gets taken away from them in a very cruel manner. So I'll send that challenge out to all the church groups, but please share with everybody that we're working to start our partnership with the homeless in the area. And Matt is our great vehicle to help us do this. So please join us in giving this month.
Thank you.
And please don't forget Project Needs. With the SNAP change in funding for SNAP, the pantry is going to be in greater needs. The buckets are out every single week. Just please remember that the food pantry is in great need.
Right. Oh, so one other thing, there is a parent series speaker coming into our church this month on the 13th of March in the evening at 6:30. And that is really about a community request for someone to come in and talk to them about parents and their need to set a good example for their children at sporting events. Because I'm sure if any of you have been in soccer, I know I lived through that dream. You have seen, that not all parents behave the way we'd like to set good examples for our children. So that speaker's coming. They're using our church, but it's a great opportunity to expose our church to a community that it's not normally exposed to. So we want to make sure people feel welcome at that event and shed a good light on our church. They need volunteers. Amy McIntyre is the point of contact. If you want to reach out, she's in the church directory. You can volunteer to help that night from 6 to 9, really just helping people with directions, where to park, where to go to the church. But we just want to create a very welcoming community and show our support for larger community issues and set a good example for our church. So please help her with that. Thanks.
And I just want to say, this is Kim Benninger. If you don't know who she is, introduce yourself. Thank you so much for coming today.